Hello, welcome to another video. And in this video I want to share this article about psychiatric symptom dimension related to deficits in goal-directed control. And this article is published in Life Sciences, which is my favorite journal. It's the most original journal because they allow editors to because we can see the communication between editor and the author. And the topic seems interesting, and characterizing a psychiatric symptom dimension related to deficits in goal-directed behavior. So they in the abstract they probably explain the goal in depth, so let's read it. Prominent theories suggest that compulsive behaviors, characteristics of compulsive disorder, and addiction are driven by shared deficits in goal-directed control, which confers vulnerability for developing rigid habits. However, recent studies have shown that deficient goal-directed control accompanies several disorders, including those without an obvious compulsive element, reasoning that this lack of clinical specificity might reflect broader issues with psychiatric diagnostic categories. So I think it's important how to define goal-directed control, so that whether we can control our behavior based on our goal, our purpose. So they probably explain how they measure goal-directed behaviors. So we investigated whether a dimensional approach would better delineate the clinical manifestations of goal-directed deficits. So they define it as a deficit. That's also interesting. Using large-scale online assessment of psychiatric symptoms and neurocognitive performance so they explain online assessment of psychiatric symptoms and neurocognitive performance in two independent general population samples, we found that deficits in goal-directed control were most strongly associated with a symptom dimension comprising compulsive behavior and intrusive thought. That is interesting. This association was highly specific when compared to other non-compulsive aspects of psychopathology. These data showcase powerful new methodology and highlight the potential of a dimensional, biologically grounded approach to psychiatry research. Dimensional, biologically grounded approach to psychiatry research. That's interesting. So they explain as here the goal-directed behavior. I think this is not introduction, right? So this is when an individual resists the temptation. So they explain goal-directed control. When an individual resists the temptation to stay out late in order to get a good night's sleep, he or she is exercising what is known as goal-directed control. This kind of control allows individuals to regulate their behavior. That's interesting. I just read about it now in a deliberate manner. So they control their behavior. It's thought that a reduction in goal-directed control may be linked to compulsiveness or compulsivity, a psychological trait that involves excessive repetition of thoughts or actions. Furthermore, evidence shows that goal-directed control is reduced in people with compulsive disorders. I thought they're good at doing things because of but I don't know, such as obsessive compulsive disorder and drug addiction. However, failures of goal-directed control have also been reported in other mental conditions that are not linked to compulsivity, such as anxiety disorders. So social anxiety disorder. So they want to talk people, but they cannot talk, I guess. So that in the context of social goals. The fact that reduced goal-directed control is found across different mental health conditions highlights a core issue in modern psychiatric research and treatment. Mental health conditions are typically defined and diagnosed by their clinical symptoms, not by their underlying psychological traits or biological abnormalities. This makes it difficult to determine the cause of a specific disorder, as its symptoms are often rooted in the same psychological and biological traits. seen in other mental health conditions. Okay, I allowed them to look compulsivity as a transdiagnostic dimension, that is, as something that exists on a spectrum, and so it's like they explain it further. So I want to read the last sentence of this paragraph, probably, which is not part of this article, I guess. These findings show that research into the causes of mental health conditions and perhaps ultimately diagnosis and treatment, all of which have traditionally approached specific disorder in isolation, will benefit greatly from a transdiagnostic approach. I'm not sure we can just reach such conclusion. I don't know. Compulsivity is a theoretical clinical phenomenon that reflects the loss of control over repetitive self-deleterious behavior seen in a range of disorders, most notably OCD and addiction, like internet addiction. But what are the underlying neural, computational, or psychological mechanisms? Something like that. So I'm looking for the novelty of the study, and I find interesting this goal-directed control has recently been computationally formalized as a rising form of reinforcement learning known as model-based, which can be expressed as an individual difference measure that has been shown to predict how likely individuals are to form habits. That's interesting. So that also patients with OCD cannot do that. So this is crucially this factor, so that how this has something to do with the two-step reinforcement learning task used to assess goal-directed learning. So is this for animal studies? I don't know. So reward, model frame, model based, rewarded, unrewarded, common, rare, and how subject choose between two fractals which probabilistically determine whether they will transition to the orange or blue second stage. For example, the trait, I'm trying to read all the, so we cannot read all the text, so let's skip this. I think it's my problem of my computer. So these data indicate that deficits in goal-directed control are a marker of normal variation in OCD symptomatology in the general population. So if there are deficits, then it has something to do with OCD or addiction, I guess. There are several experiments, and that they test the hypothesis that individual differences in total scores, severity of OCD symptoms are associated with goal-directed control. So here the questionnaire includes, this value, they use it to calculate effect size, p-value, you probably know it. This is almost not significant. That is funny. Like if it's 0.05, then the study result will be different, and that's suspicious. For so, but in experiment 2, it's not that suspicious. So 0.05. That's interesting. So that it also, depression has something to do with goal-directed behavior, right? I guess depression is not really related, but here it is related. It's not related to, but anxiety is also not not associated. Trait anxiety, so only addiction, OCD, impulsivity, eating disorders. So these are the associated disorders. For each positive So something like goal-directed behavior deficits, and okay, so I think this is a huge article, so I cannot mention all aspects of it, so I will just read the conclusion part, if there is any. They mention the method at the end, and also you can read the communication between editor and author at the end, and I guess maybe you cannot, I'm not sure, but there are some articles shared in this journal and you can read the communication between them. So okay, so let's read this, and they probably summarize the conclusions here. Here we tested the dimensional approach to investigating the neurocognitive basis of compulsivity using 2 large-scale general population samples. Evidence from multiple complementary analysis supported the conclusion that compulsive behavior and intrusive thought is a symptom dimension associated with deficits in goal-directed behavior, and is a symptom associated with goal-directed control that links features of multiple psychiatric disorders, most notably symptoms of OCD, addiction, and eating disorders. So these are the results that we saw here. Interestingly, this dimension goes beyond the uncontrolled behaviors that have been previously associated with compulsivity to include obsessions, preoccupations, and intrusive thoughts. And thanks for watching this video, and I congratulate you if you are at the 12 minute 12 and still watching this video, and I wish you will have a beautiful day. Bye bye.